All right, hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Acts chapter 17. Paul gives us a master class in apologetics. This is not just a witnessing, that he was in Athens and he was waiting for Silas and Timothy to arrive. They had been chased out of town. The Jews, who made it their mission to, today we would call it trolling, but it was more than trolling. They were actively trying to destroy. They were trying to destroy um, Paul. They were trying to destroy his ministry, his message. And I said this, kind of adding this, why were they so upset? Excuse me. And one reason is because how they were always led by Satan. I don't say that just cavalier. Sometimes people say that, the devil, the devil, the devil. But when we read scripture and then we look at scripture, how, for example, how Satan works. I think we don't really pay attention to the very, I'm going to say, plain, simple revelation. We think of demons, we think of Satan, some uh, underworld looking figure with horns and red horns, and all that. That's the figment of somebody's imagination. The biggest, you could say, uh, ploy or the tactics of Satan is the thoughts that he plants. He leads people by planting thoughts in their mind. So these Judaizers, if we were able, I'm going to say, if God was to grant us, if God was to grant us um, the ability to sit down and logically, critically say to the Jews, why are you obsessed with following a man that you don't care about? And the people that you're trying to troll, why do you care? Some of them you don't even know. They probably could not answer. Critically, they couldn't. Other than admitting to the admitting their hatred, driven by that hate, but again, the thoughts. And so Paul was waiting for Timothy and Silas to arrive. And while there, he is observing Athens. Athens at this time was one of the Greek centers, philosophical centers, cities, in the Greek term, if you want to, Paul talks a lot about this in First Corinthians when he talks about the wisdom of the world, the wisdom. And this was the Greek philosophers. They would sit around and philosophize. They would talk about wisdom. Now, there, of course, is a worldly wisdom. And the idea of the process of just sitting back and saying, observing the creation, look at a leaf that it grows and then it falls from a tree. And then you just kind of ponder that thought. You ponder the thought, oh, look at the leaves. And then you could get into, why does the leaves fall? Why do they fall in the fall time? And so again, that's philosophy. Now, as I said, in the Roman world, while you had that one side where they prided themselves on the wisdom, the philosophy, yet on the other side, they were incredibly pagan, as most of the world was, some form of paganism. And in this case, they had Paul was observing several um, um, statues devoted to pagan, deities. He probably recognized some of the names that they said, "Oh, we're gonna, this deity," and they would worship or whatever. And then, but he noticed this one. He noticed this one statue that they just had the title "To the Unknown God." Now that's interesting. They just said, "Well, if we missed one, if we missed a God." Now, later in church history, what is interesting, the Christians would be accused of atheism. Yes, yes. And the reason why is because they only worshiped one God, as opposed to, again, all of the different many gods of the pagan world. So Paul is going to take the opportunity to say, all right, this unknown God, I'm not going to acknowledge all these other gods that you all worship, but the unknown, he's going to seize that opportunity and go, let me introduce you to the unknown God. Okay. All right. So let's get into it. Acts chapter 17. So I'm going to pick it up at verse 22. Now, let me go back just to kind of show you. In verse 16 says, while Paul waited for them in Athens, his spirit was troubled within him when he saw that the city was full of idols, right? So he saw all of these idols. I'm going to skip down. Where do I want to go here? All right, let me pick it up at verse 22. Well, I'll pick it up verse 19. They took him and brought him to the Areopagus and said, may we learn about this new teaching you speak of? For what you say sounds strange to us, and we want to know what these ideas mean. Now, all the Athenians, okay, and foreigners residing there spent their time in nothing else but to telling or to hear something new. So we want to hear something. We heard you now. Some kind of way that someone heard them in the um, they heard them in the synagogues where Paul was teaching. And now they brought him out to the kind of open market. Then verse 22, then Paul stood in the middle of the Areopagus, and said, men of Athens, I see that you are extremely religious in every aspect. Now, the word religious here doesn't kind of carry the meaning that we attach to it today, although in a sense, the base of it is, okay? But notice here, he said, for as I was passing through and observing the objects of your worship, so that's the attached to the term religion. Now, I know there are a lot of Christians that try to say, well, I'm not religious, I got a relationship with the Lord. Now, that's true. That's true. But you are very much religious. Now, the, the essence of the word is observance. So it's an observance of a deity, an observance, of a faith. So every Sunday you go to church, that's classified as a religious observance, okay? And James will go on to tell us that religion itself is not bad. There's good religion, there's bad religion. So if your religion is godly, then there's nothing wrong with it. He said, "For as I was passing through and observing the objects of your worship, I even found an altar on which was inscribed to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you." Um, so Paul is just going to use their language here, and basically, he's going to use their language, and he's going to say, he's going to now make this case. He says, "The God who made the world and everything in it." Let me stop for a moment, because this is what our faith is. God has revealed, and I may be wrong, but I do not know of any other religion that the God proclaims that he is the creator of everything. And I say that, like, Islam took a lot from the Bible. So that's why I'm not counting them, because they took a lot from the Bible and then just concocted a whole different religion. But when you think about Hinduism, and I'm just saying my ignorance of them, Hinduism, Buddhism, all of those kind of religions, I don't know if you look at as God himself as presented as the creator, the God who made the world and everything in it. He is Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in shrines made by hands. Neither is he served by human hand as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath in all things. So Paul is, again, introducing really a different concept of God or religion that they never heard. In other words, if you think about all of the pagan stuff that you heard, they kind of made all this stuff up. That they made it all up. They just kind of, okay, let's just make up stuff and say. And then, for example, at one point in India, there was over 300 million gods. That's a lot of making up, This, I'm gonna tell you the thing. This thing dropped on the floor, and all of a sudden, let's worship it. Um, so um, so he introduced him because, again, the concept of the pagan religion was a statue. In fact, at one point, the Israelites, up until the Babylonian exile, never got over their idolatry, and in some cases they were worse than the pagans they imitated. And at one point, God even said to them, "Let me just show you how stupid you guys are. You have a man, he chops the tree down. He looked at a tree. He said, oh, look at this tree. Nice thick wood, nice thick tree." Now, I'm kind of paraphrasing. So then God says, "You guys, stupid, you cut the tree down. You cut the tree down." Now, he says, part of the wood you chop up, you build a house. The other part of the wood you chop up and you kindle a fire so that you can feed yourself. And then the other part of the wood, he says, you carve, you shape into a pagan deity, and then you bow down and you worship that pagan deity, and says, "Oh, you have created us, you have done that." He says, "Y'all stupid. That's just stupidity." So now here, by introducing the living God, The God who made the world and everything in it. He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by hand, neither is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath in all things. Now, this verse here, verse 26, he says, from one man, he has made every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined the appointed times and the boundaries where they live. Now, believe it or not, this verse has been one of the verses that the white supremacists use. Okay? That the segregation, and this is to our shame, but in America, and sometimes you would hear this argument today where people try to sanitize the racist history. Now, in some cases, our president is trying to erase. But one of the arguments that they would say was that slavery was everywhere. True, as we read through here, there was slavery. But when it came to the Atlantic trade, slave trade, so you got the colonizers, then you branch off and you now come to the Americas. Okay, the Americas. That trade was different because this was the first time in human slave history where they targeted a specific race of people. Okay, now you come to the Americas. So the first slaves landed on these shores in 1619, some 157 years later. In 1776, you have the Declaration of America as a free nation, as a not a Christian nation, but certainly one of the statements is that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed with inalienable rights granted by the Creator. And in the most hypocritical ways, they said, except for the Negroes, the Africans. Now, the reason why I have to say that is that now you have to say, if you believe that God has endowed every man with equality, then why do you have slaves? If America is the beacon of Christianity, why do you have slaves? Well, the problem is that the Christians themselves were bigots, were racist. That the Christians themselves owned slaves. The founding fathers owned slaves. So how do you get that in your mind to be able to say, to quote Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner, and had some very nasty thoughts, okay, some nasty thoughts about equality, some nasty thoughts about Africans. Remember, that was the difference in the American slave trade, that you had to now come up with. You had to condition the minds of people. And I'll pick this up next time because I want to go further into this. Because this verse here, verse 26, believe it or not, this verse both condemns the idea of racism, yet at the same time, this verse was used to justify racism, segregation. And I'll pick it up next time. It's terrible stain on the church. But not just the country, but the church. Alright guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I will see you